Greetings to my fellow peace blunderers and welcome to my brand new series where I'm going to give you a lightning quick overview of popular and not so much chess gambits. A lot of you guys told me in a poll that you're completely sick of playing against the Sicilian defense, so today I'm going to give you a deadly weapon to fight against it, the Smith-Morra Gambit. It's one of my favorite gambits of all time. The moves and the general guidelines you see on the right side of your screen. And if you just so happen to find this video useful, please like and subscribe, it helps me out massively, love you. Okay, let's go. We are starting with e4, c5, the dreaded Sicilian. And usually the reason why black goes for the Sicilian and plays c5 is to stop white from playing d4. However, we do not care what black wants and play d4 anyway. Black takes, and now you can technically, but I do not recommend you to take with the queen. This already equalizes the position for black and gives him a very comfortable game after queen takes, knight to c6, attacking the queen. So instead, we play the actual gambit with pawn to c3. Black now gladly takes the extra pawn and we retake with the knight. Now most of you know that usually gambits are all about rapid development at a cost of material. But in that sense, Smith-Morra isn't really your typical gambit. You could easily argue that having just one more piece out early in the game than your opponent is not enough to compensate for the missing central pawn. And honestly, I would agree, but the Smith-Morra isn't only about pushing your pieces out as quickly as possible. Because one of the key components of the Smith-Morra is to very quickly get our rooks onto the c1 and d1 squares. And because the pawns are missing, the rooks will be very effective. From here on out, please do your best to memorize the setup of your pieces I'm about to show. This setup will be a constant across many Smith-Morra lines, so even if black plays something unusual, in most cases with this setup you will be completely fine. The main line goes like this: knight c6. Please remember that e5 is a very important move in the Smith-Morra and it can be devastating for black if white times it well. So a lot of the time black will do his best to try and stop it. Knight f3 developing, fighting for e5. d6 also fighting for e5. Bishop c4 developing and staring at f7. e6 blunting the c4 bishop a little bit. Castles. Knight f6 developing. Queen e2, a very multi-purpose move. It frees up the d1 square for the rook. It protects the e4 pawn and stares at the king at e8, which is still in the center. Bishop e7 developing, preparing to castle. Rook d1 putting the rook onto a very nice square and staring at the queen. e5 stopping all the chances of a devastating e5 for white for now. Bishop e3 developing, castles, and now rook goes to c1. Again, please notice how we moved every single of our pieces onto the center of the board and we moved each only once. The position is objectively equal, but on a human level is a bit more pleasant to play for white than it is for black. The extra d-pawn that black possesses will be more of a liability than an asset, which should be one of the main white's targets throughout the game. Also, one of the most important ideas in a Smith-Morra is that if black isn't careful and plays something like knight a5 attacking your bishop, we can now utilize that pin on a queen and take on a5. The pawn shouldn't really be capturing the knight because the queen will then go away. So whenever we get to make use of that pin and capture on a5, white should be really happy. Some other plans for white include the queenside expansion, and overall, I would recommend white to focus on the queen side as much as possible because most of our pieces are situated there. You should understand that in most Smith-Morra positions, it's not about a rapid attack on the king and on a king side. It's more of a positional gambit looking to exploit our developmental advantage and squeeze the opponent slowly but surely. Provoking weaknesses, conceding squares, and eventually, hopefully, conceding material. Okay, so this was the main line, now let's take a look at some other moves. First of all, starting move 4, don't be confused if black follows a slightly different move order. Black doesn't have to play knight c6 on move 4, for example, now he can play d6 as well. You should follow up with your default plan, knight f3, then let's say black still doesn't play knight c6, he plays e6, that's completely fine, you still play bishop c4, knight c6 only now, castles, knight f6, and we have now transposed into the same position that we saw at the beginning of the video. With the same effect, black can play e6 on move 4, we still play knight f3, knight c6, bishop c4, knight f6, castles, d6, again we arrive at the same position. Do not be confused by different move orders. They should not affect your starting move as long as we reach this kind of setup in the end for black, and it's very easy to memorize. What should however pique your attention, for example, if black plays knight c6, you play knight f3, and black now plays e5, that should immediately ring bells in your head. In the Smith-Morra, e5 before move 9 for black is usually a bad move, and you should be prepared to punish it. Now we still play our typical bishop c4, and if we see an innocuous knight to f6 simply and naturally developing, this is where we spring our trap, and we do that with knight g5. You see, the reason why e5 usually is bad for black at the start of the game is because the f7 square gets exposed. The pawn cannot physically go back to e6 now to protect the diagonal, and now the only half decent way for black to handle it is to sacrifice the pawn back with d5, and now takes with bishop, knight takes, pawn takes, attacking the c knight, knight z4, castles, and now we have a very comfortable position for white. In the same manner, for example, if we see d6 and then bishop c4 and now e5, we enter the same punishing motif with knight g5 attacking f7. Granted, this time the black knight can go to h6 defending the f7 square some more. However, now we can play queen f3 pressuring f7 even more, and if something like queen c7 defending f7, we can play knight d5 attacking the queen. The position for black is just slowly falling apart. Now, most black setups should not affect the way we place our pieces in the starting 11 moves. In many positions, be prepared to play knight f3, bishop c4, castles, queen e2, rook d1, bishop e3, and rook c1. And yes, there is more than one setup for black that requires special attention. I'm not going to show all of them, I'm just going to show the one that's most popular. Knight c6, the default knight f3, and now g6 for black, entering some sort of dragon-like setup. And now fianchettoing with bishop g7. Here, the only really effective move, and it's quite hard to find if you don't know it, is e5. It kind of hangs one more pawn, but let's see why it makes sense. Knight takes, bishop takes, and we're starting to see what the point of the sacrifice was with bishop takes f7. King takes, and now queen d5 with check, double attacking the king and the bishop on e5. And here you need to remember that the only good move with the king is king to g7. Queen takes with check, knight f6 blocking, castles, white is still a pawn down, but this position, I guess you could agree, is very pleasant. Don't be confused if after queen d5 check, your opponent plays e6. In fact, you should be very happy. Queen takes bishop, attacking the rook, queen f6 blocking and begging to exchange the queens, and of course we deny the exchange with queen g3. In this position, the black king is a little bit more exposed than in the previous one. The queen is really misplaced on f6 and is about to get harassed by one of our minor pieces. And the dark squared c8 bishop is looking really pathetic. Coming back all the way to the start, if black declines the gambit by pushing the pawn forward with d3, our piece setup will actually remain the same, just with slight alterations. Let me very quickly go over the line to show you what I mean. Bishop takes, knight e6, knight f3, no surprise there, e6, castles, d6, queen e2, knight f6, rook d1, queen c7, c4, bishop e7, knight c3, castles, bishop e3, bishop d7, rook a to c1, rook a to c8. And now I believe we have seen something like this before, haven't we? Yes, the light squared bishop isn't on c4, but that's because the pawn is there. Black didn't have the guts to actually capture the c-pawn, so what can we do? Just memorize the setup, keep your pieces nice and centralized, and I'm sure you will get a nice little advantage out of the opening. And if black decides to chicken out of this gambit in some other way, let's say with knight f6, attacking the pawn on e5, then the main idea that you should remember is that regardless of what black plays, knight f6 isn't the only move. We should first deal with any of the possible threats that move is created. For example, now our e5 pawn is attacked, e5 attacking the knight, knight goes to d5, and now when all the threats are dealt with, if any, we just capture with cd and have a very pleasant position. And one final very important thing, in a lots of Smith-Morra positions, especially but not necessarily when the king is still in the center and the queen is, for example, on c7, be ready to consider, calculate and play knight d5. The knight d5 sacrifice is one of the central sacrifices in the Smith-Morra Gambit, and this is the move that you should always consider. It is played in so many positions, it's impossible to cover them all. The idea in this exact position at least is that if takes, we now capture the c6 knight with the rook, attacking the queen in the process. And the rook is not hanging because if queen takes, we capture the pawn with check and the black queen is lost. And if the queen simply retreats to e7, blocking all discovered checks, we capture the d5 pawn with the bishop and enjoy a very comfortable position. Always keep in mind the knight d5 sacrifice even when it looks absolutely ridiculous. And that is going to be it, my favorite unintentional gambiteers. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And as per usual, may all your chess moves on the board be exclam moves and have an excellent day. Love you guys. See you in the next one.